All right, let's jump right in. We're about to talk about a group of people from history that everybody thinks they know, but almost everyone gets completely wrong. And it turns out their story from over 200 years ago has everything to do with the AI revolution that we are all living through right now.
First things first, let's just get this out of the way, right off the bat. The popular idea of the Luddites, the one we've all heard, is that they were just anti-technology.
And that they were, kind of dumb, just ignorant, backward-thinking people who were terrified of the future. But that's not just wrong, it's the opposite of the truth. It was precisely because they were so skilled, so smart about their own work, that they could see exactly what was coming.
And here's the real kicker. They were right. Not just about the machines back then, but about the big questions of power, control, and what progress really means. The exact same questions we're wrestling with today with AI.
So just think about that for a second. What if the biggest debate of our lifetime, what we do about artificial intelligence, was already hashed out in the fields and factories of England 2 centuries ago? Let's take a look.
To really understand what's coming, we have to go back to the beginning. So we're going to travel back in time to the smoke-filled skies of early 19th century England, right into the heart of the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, this slide right here, this is where we completely flip the script. On the left, you've got the myth, mindless workers smashing machines they didn't get. But the reality? Well, that's on the right. These were skilled, middle-class craftsmen protesting the exploitation that the new technology enabled. They weren't afraid of the future. They were fighting for their place in it.
You have to understand, these weren't just any workers. For centuries, textile weavers had been honing their craft. They were the established middle class of their time. And then, suddenly, these new automated looms and frames show up, and factory owners could now hire less skilled, low-wage workers, even children, to churn out huge quantities of frankly inferior goods. For the artisans, the result was an absolute catastrophe: mass unemployment, wages that just fell through the floor, and the complete destruction of their craft.
So this brings us to the big question, right? Why smash the machines? Because it wasn't just blind rage. It was a calculated move, a targeted tactic in what was basically an economic war. So let's break down what they were actually fighting.
And this is the crucial point to get. Their fight was never, ever with the machines themselves. It was with how the machines were being used. They were protesting what they called a fraudulent and deceitful use of machinery, a way to de-skill their work, to drive down their pay, and to completely strip them of any bargaining power. The technology wasn't the enemy. The exploitation was.
So, how did the factory owners and the government respond? Well, not with a friendly chat. They came back with overwhelming force. First, they straight up made unions and strikes illegal. Then, they sent in the army. And get this, at one point there were more British soldiers fighting the Luddites in England than were fighting Napoleon over in Spain. And finally, they passed a law that made breaking a machine a capital offense, punishable by death.
This quote, it just says it all. It's from the poet Lord Byron, and he actually delivered it in a fiery speech in Parliament, defending the Luddites. He described them as men who were meager with famine, sullen with despair, and he challenged the politicians for valuing a piece of machinery more than a human life. It was an incredibly powerful plea, but ultimately, no one listened.
So how did the story get so twisted? It's simple, really. History is written by the victors. The factory owners and the government, they won. They crushed the rebellion. And then they spent the next 200 years turning the word Luddite into an insult, a synonym for being ignorant and anti-progress. And honestly, it was a brilliant piece of propaganda that has stuck with us to this very day.
Okay, so you've got the real history now. Let's fast forward 200 years to right now. Because once you know the real story of the Luddites, you start seeing these really eerie parallels everywhere, especially with artificial intelligence. Just take a second and look at this. It's almost a perfect mirror. The technology is different, sure. Automated looms then, generative AI now. The workers are different. Skilled artisans then, white-collar writers and coders today. But look at the core conflict. Back then, it was quality versus quantity. Today, it's about augmenting human skill versus replacing it entirely. And just listen to the justification. Back then, the line was, progress is inevitable. Today, it's, you can't stop technology. It's the exact same argument.
And this brings us right to the heart of the matter today. We're facing a choice with AI. This is not some single, unavoidable path. There are two very, very different directions this whole thing can go.
Researchers actually have a name for this. They call it the Turing trap. And it's basically the mistake of focusing all of our energy on making AI that can just copy and replace what humans already do, instead of building tools that supercharge our own abilities and help us do completely new things.
And the stakes here, they could not be higher. On one path, AI is a tool. It complements what we do. People stay essential, and the massive economic gains are shared pretty broadly. But on the other path, AI is a replacement. It's a substitute for us. Workers lose their power, and all that wealth gets concentrated in the hands of the very few people who own the tech. Sound familiar?
And look, this isn't some theoretical, far-off future. It is happening right now, as we speak. We're already seeing reports that AI can outperform junior human coders. We're seeing mass layoffs in tech, and they're being justified as business efficiencies. Just like the Luddites, a lot of skilled workers today are facing this really chaotic period where their jobs might vanish long before any new ones are created to replace them.
So what does the legacy of this 200-year-old rebellion really teach us as we stand here on the edge of our own massive technological revolution?
Well, the first lesson is that technology is never neutral. It is always shaped by the values and the goals of the people who build it and deploy it. And that forces us to ask this really critical question. Who gets to decide what progress even means? Is it just about profit and efficiency? Or should things like human well-being and shared prosperity be part of the equation?
Now let's be clear. The Luddites were defeated. They lost the battle, badly. But their protest wasn't for nothing. The questions they raised about fairness, about power, about the human costs of automation, those questions didn't just disappear. They echoed for the next 100 years and eventually helped fuel the movements for things like labor unions and workers' rights.
Which brings it all back to today. The debate isn't really about being for or against AI. The Luddites proved that. The real question is this. Are you against the technology itself, or are you against a future where that technology makes you feel disposable?
And that's the heart of it all. The Luddites were not afraid of the future. They were afraid of a future that had no place for them. A future where their skills, their communities, and their basic dignity just didn't matter anymore. So the story of the Luddites leaves us with one final urgent question. And it's not a technical question, it's a political one. It's not about if AI is good or bad. It's about who gets to decide how it's used and who benefits from it. The real question is, who should be in control of the future of work?